Hi, it's Caitlin. We're about a month into 2021 now, entering a new year, but I want to look back on 2020 for a brief moment, and I only want to look back on what I read because it wasn't a great year for me, for so many people, for pretty much the entire world, for many different reasons, and one unifying reason. One of the things that I am really grateful for this past year was reading and books because they continued to make me happy and to give me a purpose and make me feel things whenever I needed to feel them. And I had a really wonderful reading year. I set a Goodreads goal to read 30 books last year, and I ended up doubling that and read 60 books, probably because I had nowhere to go and lots of books to read, so I did that. But not just in terms of quantity, but also in quality, which is what really matters. I read a lot of books that I enjoyed personally in my free time this year, but something that really shocked me this year was that I read so many wonderful books in my classes, which isn't really something that I've had happen a lot in the past. I've gotten kind of unlucky in previous classes and read a lot of things that I just wasn't interested in or just felt really dry and dull to me and just not great. But this past year, I've read some things in some of my classes that have really stuck with me, that really had impact on me, that I might even revisit in the future because I loved them that much. And so without further ado, I will talk about those books. And of course, these are books that I read in 2020, so not 2020 releases, just books that I personally picked up and read this year or last year. This list is in no order whatsoever, so I'm just going to start with probably something that's one of my favorite things I read this year, which is The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. And I was so excited to read this because it's so hyped, obviously. I liked the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm excited that there's going to be a TV series based off of that trilogy as well as this duology because that seems like a great idea to combine them to me. But I wasn't like really invested in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. Like, I liked it, but I wasn't such a fan that I would recommend it to people. I would just say, yeah, I enjoyed that. But this is something else entirely. These are awesome. These are incredible. The characters are so dynamic, and the dynamic between the characters, see what I did there, is so entertaining to read as well. Because if you don't know, Six of Crows, the first book, if I can get it out of this box set that I have, Six of Crows basically follows a band of young adults, teenagers, I guess they are working together to pull off an impossible heist. And so if a heist plot is possibly your cup of tea, then you should read this book, absolutely. The second book is equally as good as the first book, if not better. They were a wonderful time to read this summer, and I'm so happy that I picked them up. Next, I have a very different kind of book, which is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I read this in my women's autobiographical writing class, and I'm so happy that this was assigned. This was the book I was most excited to read in that class, and it lived up to the hype 100%. I think that this is such an impactful book that almost anybody should read, with the caveat that it is dealing with a lot of sensitive topics such as rape, growing up as a Black woman in the South, but also in moving to San Francisco. If you are someone who is able to read something that deals with sensitive matters such as those, then I would highly recommend this book because it honestly feels like an honor that Maya Angelou chose to tell her story, and she continues to do so in more autobiographies that she wrote after this one, which I might pick up in the future. But yes, this is incredible. Next, I have The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson, which is another book that I read over the summer, and it was kind of like a whimsy pick. Like, I wasn't really looking for anything in particular on my bookshelf. I think I actually just picked a random book, like closed my eyes and just picked a book, and I read this, and this was really wonderful. This book takes place in a fantasy world in which Leah is a princess, and she runs away before her wedding day because she doesn't know this man and doesn't want to marry someone just because she's been told she has to. And she tries to just escape in the small town and make a life for herself, but following her are both the prince who she was supposed to marry and an assassin that is sent to kill her. But what makes this book so interesting is that you don't know who is the assassin and who is the prince. The perspectives are unnamed, so you don't know who intends to do what with her. And it makes it so addicting to read this book, and you just want to figure out who is who, and when it finally gets there, I like went back and reread everything that I already read because I wanted to see how it felt knowing who they were then. I loved this. It was so fun to read. I also read the other 2 books in the trilogy and I enjoyed them, but not nearly as much as this one. So I think this is the true gem out of the set. Next I have Dumplin by Julie Murphy, and this book is just so charming. It is about a girl named Willowdean who lives in a small Texas town, which was very relatable for me, having grown up in Texas, and I really appreciated all the references they made to like Texas culture. I don't even know if you could say that it is a culture, but like just random things that Texans would know and connect with, or at least acknowledge the existence of. And Willowdean's mother runs the beauty pageant in that town, which occurs every single year, and Willowdean is kind of fed up with it, and as a plus size girl she decides that she is going to enter the beauty pageant, and the town is, you know, shocked by this, of course, but she is on kind of a journey with herself that she didn't realize she was entering along the way. I really like how this book addresses insecurity and at the same time incorporated really wholesome elements into the story. It made me feel so comfortable while I was reading it, and I just love this and I would recommend it to anybody who it sounds interesting to. Next is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which is kind of the outlier of this group, I guess you could say, because it's an older book, right? It's by a Bronte sister. And I also read this for class, and I was kind of intimidated when I saw this as the first book that we were going to read in the spring semester, and I thought, okay, well, it's starting it off, I guess. But I absolutely loved it. Jane Eyre is essentially an orphan who is raised by her aunt in a suspiciously Harry Potter-esque scenario, which makes me believe that perhaps J.K. Rowling drew maybe some inspiration from this book. Who really knows? But yeah, she eventually gets taken off and becomes a governess. This book follows her life and the journey that she goes on in discovering herself and engaging with a world that is patriarchal in nature, and how she chooses to navigate that. Most fascinating about this book are Jane's moments of agency, and in some of them you can really hear Charlotte Bronte, the author, like speaking through Jane, and I think that is incredible. Next I have 3 short story collections that I want to mention, and I kept trying to like make myself choose between these 3 short story collections, but I don't know why I was trying to do that, because I feel like they're each special and deserve to be recognized and like read in their own right, so I'm just going to mention all 3 of them. The first is The Interpreter of Maladies by Dumplin, and then The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and Crick Crack by Eboj Danticat. And I read all 3 of these short stories collections for a global short story class that I was in, and each of these are absolutely beautiful collections, but they each center around different regions of the world. So The Interpreter of Maladies speaks mainly on South Asian culture, takes place mainly in India or Indian immigrants or Bangladesh, countries around that area. The prose is gorgeous. It feels like Lahiri has a special ability to just tap into how to describe very genuine human emotion through mundane things, like through objects or small actions. She's just very good at translating those prosaically. The Thing Around Your Neck focuses on different countries within Africa. Each story is in a different location, or sometimes it's immigrants from Africa. What struck me most about this collection is that sometimes Adichie just hits you with a line that just leaves you dumbstruck, just sitting there thinking about that line for like 10 minutes and thinking, wow, I just read that. And that kind of impact is really special, and I think this might be my favorite out of the 3, but I'm not really sure. And Crick Crack follows a selection of stories of people from Haiti, or people from Haiti who were migrating to the Dominican Republic, and it kind of talks about the consequences of the political instability on the lives of these people, and all the stories are connected by somehow each of the characters are connected to this fictional place of B.A. Rose, which is just kind of a nice magical realism element just sprinkled in there. But yes, beautiful. Next, I want to briefly talk about Becoming by Michelle Obama, because this is a year that I got into audiobooks, and I really, really love audiobooks. And this was easily one of the best that I listened to this year because it's narrated by Michelle Obama, which is a blessing, a miracle. Just, if you haven't listened to this audiobook, I highly recommend it because it is just a beautiful experience. It lets you know more about the life of a woman before she came into the limelight, as she was doing so, as she met people that made her life what it is, as she became First Lady, and it's so unique to hear from a First Lady's perspective. So yeah, this book deserves all the attention that it gets. Lastly, I want to talk about The Price Guide to the Occult by Leslie Walton. I read this recently about the last month of the year, and after I finished it, I thought, okay, I love that, but I think maybe not a 5 stars. I was like, okay, like 4.5 stars. But the more that I've sat and given it time to marinate in my mind, the more that I love it, and the small things don't really bother me as much, and it really has stuck with me, and I think about the story often. It follows a girl named Noor who lives on an island in which her family has lived for generations, and they have this curse upon their family. The curse dictates that each female family member of each generation will fall in love with one of the descendants of the original male settlers of the island, and it's this weird cycle of magic because each generation also has her own burden, which is like a magical ability, and basically Noor is just trying to be normal, but can she? That's all I have for today. Those were my favorite books of 2020. It was a wonderful reading year, and hopefully I read some equally fantastic books next year. I sure hope so. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.